Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I live in a quiet rural town. The kind of town where the nights are so dark, it feels like the whole world has been swallowed by the blackness. The kind of place where silence is so thick it presses against your ears and makes your heart beat the loudest thing you can hear. It's peaceful, I suppose, but there's a strange kind of isolation here too. It wasn't always like this. I used to live in the city, surrounded by noise and chaos. But after my grandmother passed away, I moved into her old cottage. It was hers for decades, and it's been in the family for generations. I don't know what drew me to it. Maybe it was the peace, or maybe I thought it would be a good way to finally get away from everything that had been happening in my life. Whatever the reason, I packed up my things and left the city behind. The first week was fine. I went through the motions, unpacked, cleaned, settled in. There was a lot of dust, of course. Grandma didn't really take care of the place after she got too old, but it wasn't anything I couldn't fix. The quiet was strange at first, but I began to get used to it. The house creaked with every gust of wind. The floorboards groaned underfoot like they were alive. I never thought much of it though. Old houses have a way of making you think there's something else going on inside them. But it's nothing to get worked up about. At least, that's what I thought. But then, on Tuesday night, everything changed. It was around 2:37 a.m. when I first heard it. Max, my Labrador, was growling at the front door. Max wasn't the type of dog to bark at nothing. He wasn't a guard dog, but he was protective, especially around strangers. He'd lived with me for years, and we both had a quiet understanding of how the world worked. He was a calm dog, usually content to lie by the fire or curl up on the couch. But this night, something was different. His growl wasn't like the usual low rumble in his throat. It was sharp and insistent, almost like he was warning me. I got up from the couch, puzzled, and walked over to the door. I looked out through the peephole. There was nothing. The yard was dark and still, the trees swaying gently in the wind. No one was out there. Max was still growling, now louder, more frantic. I called his name, but he didn't stop. His growls shifted into something else. More of a whimper now, a kind of pleading sound. It made my skin crawl, and then, just as I was about to open the door to calm him down, I heard it. 3 knocks. Soft. Measured. They weren't the knocks of a person at the door. No hurried or frantic pounding. Just 3 deliberate, rhythmic knocks. There was no doorbell. No knocks coming from the other side of the house. It was as if the sound was coming from nowhere and everywhere all at once. It was the kind of sound that gets under your skin, like someone is trying to make you notice something. I hesitated, unsure of what to do. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just the wind or maybe some animal. But the sound, it felt deliberate. I opened the door, my heart thudding in my chest. There was no one there. The yard was empty, the darkness stretching out into the trees. The wind carrying the scent of damp earth and pine. But Max was already outside, running in circles, barking like he was chasing something just out of reach. His eyes were wide, his body tense, and there was a frantic energy to his movements that made me feel uneasy. "Max!" I shouted, stepping outside onto the porch. My feet were bare, the cold night air biting at my skin, but I didn't care. I was focused on him, on the way he was acting. Come back here." But Max didn't listen. He ran straight toward the trees, barking and growling in a way I'd never heard before. My heart raced as I followed him, stepping into the darkness, the ground soft and uneven beneath my feet. The woods were thick here, and there was an eerie silence that seemed to swallow up the sounds of the night. I followed Max until we reached the tree line. He stopped there, suddenly still, staring into the darkness. His tail was tucked between his legs, his body tense with fear. I called his name again, but he didn't budge. He was looking at something I couldn't see. And then I heard it. A voice. Soft. Familiar. Warm. "Come here, sweetheart." It was my grandmother's voice. Clear as day. I froze. My blood ran cold, my heart hammering in my chest. My grandmother had been dead for 2 months. I hadn't even been able to attend her funeral. Things had been too complicated. But I knew her voice. I recognized it like it was a part of me. And there it was, coming from the woods, from the very spot where Max was staring. My stomach churned, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. This wasn't right. None of this was right. Max, as if on cue, turned and sprinted back toward the house, whining as he went. His tail was still between his legs, and he looked terrified. He didn't stop running until he was back inside the house, his body shaking with fear. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I stayed up, wide-eyed, listening to the sounds of the house creaking in the wind, my mind racing with what had just happened. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear my grandmother's voice again, calling me from the woods. It felt real, too real. The next morning, I went outside, my nerves still on edge. I needed to see what had happened, to make sense of it. Max wasn't his usual self. He wouldn't leave my side, his eyes constantly darting around the yard, as if he was still expecting something to appear. And then I saw it. In the mud by the trees, there were footprints. Small, bare, like a woman's. But there was something wrong with them. The toes were twisted, facing backward, as if they were meant to walk in the opposite direction. I couldn't bring myself to get any closer. I just stood there, staring at them, feeling the weight of the cold, oppressive air around me. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was my grandmother, or it was something pretending to be her. But I can't bring myself to go outside at night anymore. And Max doesn't go near the woods either. We stay inside now, where the shadows don't feel as dark, where the silence doesn't press in so close. And every now and then, when I'm alone, I'll hear it. 3 knocks, soft, measured, and I'll know, without a doubt, that it's still out there. Story 2. I used to work the night shift at a 24-hour gas station off a highway. It wasn't much, just a tiny shack of a place surrounded by fields on one side and a stretch of dark, empty road on the other. It was always quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your thoughts loud. You'd get the occasional trucker, a few college kids pulling in for snacks and coffee, and sometimes drunks stumbling out of bars on their way home. Nothing out of the ordinary. At least, not until the tapes. I remember it clearly. It was a Wednesday night, around 2:30 a.m. It was just me, a cup of coffee, and the steady hum of the fluorescent lights above me. The low buzz of the soda cooler. No one had come in for the last hour. It felt like I was alone in the whole world. That's when my manager, Steve, called. He was out of town for the weekend, and had been checking in on me, asking how things were going. I told him the usual, quiet night, nothing happening. He then said, "Hey, check camera 4. Some guy's been hanging around the dumpsters. Just keep an eye on it." I didn't think much of it at first. We got a lot of weirdos on the highway, people trying to fix their cars or just wandering around in the middle of nowhere. I glanced over the monitor for camera 4. It showed the area behind the station where the dumpsters were. Nothing moved, just shadows. I was about to move on when I noticed him, a tall figure. It was hard to make out much detail at first. The screen was grainy, the light from the street lamps barely enough to give anything away. But he was there, standing still, right by the dumpsters. A man, dressed in a tattered black hoodie. His face, nothing. It was just a void, as if there was no face at all. I stared for a long time, trying to make sense of it. Why was he just standing there? I leaned in closer, pressing my face to the screen. He didn't move, not a muscle, just stood, staring right at the camera. It made my stomach twist. I decided to check it out. I grabbed a flashlight and headed out into the night. It was cold, and the wind whipped through the empty lot, making everything feel even emptier. The faint glow of the gas pumps was the only light for miles. I walked slowly toward the dumpsters, shining my flashlight in all directions. The place smelled like stale trash, and the silence was unnerving. I glanced back at the station, half expecting to see someone behind the counter. But no, it was just me, alone. I stood there for a moment, listening to the wind. Nothing. No footsteps. No sounds of anyone lurking around. The dumpsters were still. I walked behind them, checking the ground for any sign of a person. But there was nothing. No footprints. No signs that anyone had been there. Confused, I turned around and headed back to the station, my breath visible in the cold night air. I was halfway to the door when I glanced back at the security feed on the monitor. The man was closer. He hadn't moved from his spot by the dumpster, but somehow he was closer. It was as if he'd somehow shifted, like he had slid across the ground without ever stepping. His presence seemed to fill the screen now, his outline clearer, but still no face. The coldness in his stare seemed to pierce through the screen, and a chill ran down my spine. My hands trembled, gripping the flashlight tighter. I pulled my phone from my pocket and called Steve. My voice cracked as I said, "Steve, something's wrong. This guy's been standing there for hours. He's not moving, not a damn inch." Steve's voice was calm, almost too calm. "Just keep an eye on it, man. You're fine." But I didn't feel fine. I felt watched, and I felt stupid standing in the middle of a gas station, talking to a phone when I could clearly see something strange happening right in front of me. I pulled up the footage from earlier, trying to make sense of it. I rewound the tape. I watched him stand there, motionless. Time passed, and he didn't budge. I pressed pause and zoomed in on his figure. That's when I saw something even worse. The man was smiling. It was subtle, but it was there. A barely perceptible twitch in the corners of his mouth. That small, horrific detail made the air feel like it was suffocating me. I rushed outside again, my breath now a mist in the freezing air. The parking lot was empty. The only sound was the hum of the lights. No figure by the dumpsters. No one at all. But when I turned to head back into the station, I saw something that made my blood run cold. He was in the window, standing inside the station, right behind the counter. I could see his figure clearly now, towering in the reflection of the glass. His hoodie, his long, gangly arms, his face, or rather, the lack of it, was still there, an empty void staring back at me. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the sidewalk. My heart was pounding, my chest tight. I rushed back inside and slammed the door behind me, locking it. My breathing was ragged. I checked the cameras, but the figure was gone. Nothing but static where he'd been. It was like he had never been there at all. I stood there, staring at the security feed for what felt like hours, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But nothing did. No more movement. The night was still, like nothing had ever occurred. It wasn't until later, after I tried to calm myself down, that I checked the footage again. That's when I saw it. The man was back on camera 4, just standing there, watching. But now, I was the one in front of the camera. The feed had looped, somehow, and I was standing exactly where he had been, staring back at the lens with that same empty, faceless stare. I didn't know how to process it. I didn't know how to explain it. All I knew was that I couldn't stay there a second longer. I handed in my resignation the next morning. I packed my things, left the keys on Steve's desk, and never looked back. But every now and then, late at night, when I close my eyes, I still feel that stare. That empty, faceless stare, watching, waiting. Story 3. When my aunt asked me to house sit for her, I figured it would be a peaceful weekend. She and Uncle Mike were headed to the lake, and I was left with a modern 2-story house in a quiet suburb, a full fridge, and the remote control all to myself. I'd stayed there before, but never alone. That part didn't bother me. I actually looked forward to it. The place had a cold, almost too clean vibe. You know the type. Big, open spaces. Everything white or gray. Polished marble floors. Walls that looked like they'd never heard a voice louder than a whisper. It didn't feel lived in, but that was my aunt's style. She liked everything to look like it came from a magazine. But the mirrors, those damn mirrors, they were everywhere. Massive, floor-length ones in every hallway. She said it made the space feel open, like it breathed better. Maybe that's true in daylight, but at night, when the house settled and shadows crept in, those mirrors didn't make anything feel open. They felt like doors. Doors to someplace else. It was just after 1 a.m. when it happened. I had finished a movie, some rom-com I wasn't even watching, and went to brush my teeth. The bathroom was at the end of the second-floor hallway, opposite one of those giant mirrors. As I brushed, I glanced out into the hallway through the open door and caught a glimpse of movement in the mirror. Someone had walked across the hall. I froze mid-brush. The electric toothbrush buzzed like a bug trapped in my hand. I stepped out into the hallway, expecting maybe a shadow or the movement of a curtain. But the air was still. The hallway was empty. Then I looked at the mirror. She was still there. A woman, wearing a long white dress, like something out of another century. Her back was to me. Her hair was long and tangled, black as ink, dripping over her shoulders like it had just been pulled from water. She stood at the far end of the hallway, only in the mirror. I turned and looked down the real hall. Nothing. My breath caught in my throat. I looked again at the reflection. Still there. Same spot. Unmoving. I don't know why, but I couldn't look away. It was like my eyes were glued to her. That's when the lights began to flicker, one by one, The overhead hallway lights began to blink, soft at first, then more frantic, like the house was warning me. We're trying to breathe. I stepped backward, still staring at her reflection. My heartbeat thudded in my chest, loud and stupid. And then she moved. In the mirror, she turned, slowly, deliberately, like someone who knew she was being watched. I saw her face. I wish I hadn't. Her skin was pale, too pale. Her eyes were wide and sunken, black pits like dried up wells. And her mouth, God, her mouth, stretched into a smile that didn't belong on any human face. Too wide, too sharp, like her lips were being pulled by invisible hooks. But the scariest part, the reflection behind her wasn't the house anymore. It had changed. The hallway in the mirror was old, crumbling, covered in mold and cobwebs. The wallpaper peeled off in thick strips. The lights in that hallway swung, as if in a storm, though the real hallway was still. She wasn't just standing in a mirror. She was standing in a different place entirely. And she was looking right at me. She lifted her hand, slow and shaky like her bones were cracking with every movement. Her fingers were long, too long. She touched the mirror, and it cracked, right under her fingertip, just a hairline at first. Then it spiderwebbed out across the entire surface. I swear, I heard it creak. I ran. No shoes. No phone. I bolted down the stairs and out the front door like the house had caught fire. I sat in my car, barefoot on the cold floor mat, and waited. I didn't go back inside until the sun was fully up. When I finally found the courage to return, the hallway was just a hallway again. But the mirror was shattered. Not cracked, shattered. Pieces of it littered the floor like sharp glitter. I cleaned it up before my aunt came home. Didn't say a word. But a week later, she called me. Did anything strange happen while you were here? I froze. Why? Well, we had to replace that mirror again. Again, I asked. Yeah, third time this year. It keeps cracking. Always the same spot. She laughed it off. Said maybe the frame was loose. Maybe the wall shifts. Old house quirks, she called it. But I never went back. And I still see her sometimes. Not often. Just little flashes. In windows. In dark TV screens. In the chrome of my toaster. And every time, she's getting closer.